Remember when Toronto meant opportunity? A city brimming with promise, where dreams felt within reach. Fast forward to 2025, and the question looms, can anyone still afford to live here? Once a beacon of hope, has Toronto become a fading dream? 1. Toronto, a tale of two cities. 10 years ago, Toronto was the place to be. If you asked anyone in 2015 where they'd dream of living in Canada, chances are Toronto would have been on that list. It had everything: reasonable housing prices, a thriving economy with solid job opportunities, and a quality of life that consistently ranked high compared to other cities in the world. For those who love culture, food, and diversity, why wouldn't you want to live there? Back then, Toronto wasn't just a city, it was a lifestyle. But that feels like a lifetime ago now. In 2015, the average home price in Toronto hovered around $622,000. Expensive? Sure, but not impossible, especially when paired with average salaries and a manageable cost of living. Renting was feasible, too. A one-bedroom apartment cost around $1,100 to $1,200 a month. People genuinely believed they could save enough to buy their first home and start building a life. The job market was buzzing, especially in fields like finance, healthcare, and tech. Opportunities were plentiful, and the city felt like it was on an upward trajectory. Toronto's diversity was another magnet. Walking through neighborhoods like Kensington Market or Scarborough gave you a sense of how many cultures lived side by side. Restaurants serving authentic cuisines from around the world, cultural festivals that packed entire streets, and a sense of community made the city feel alive. This atmosphere welcomed immigrants and gave them a sense of belonging. For many, Toronto represented not just opportunity but home. But as Toronto's skyline rose, cracks in the foundation began to show. Even in 2015, there were whispers: house prices creeping upward, rents inching higher in popular neighborhoods, and bidding wars where homes sold for way above asking prices. At the time, it felt like growing pains for a booming city, not the start of a crisis. Then came the population boom. Between 2015 and 2020, immigration soared, with hundreds of thousands of people settling in Toronto. Add in international students and skilled workers flocking to the city, and the population grew faster than the infrastructure could handle. Initially, this seemed like a good thing. More people meant a stronger economy and a more vibrant culture. But soon, the city began to feel the strain. By the early 2020s, housing supply wasn't just tight, it was suffocating. Homes that once cost $600,000 were now selling for over $1 million. Interest rates climbed, pricing out even those who thought they could manage a mortgage. Renting became a nightmare. By 2025, a one-bedroom apartment could cost upwards of $2,500 a month. Landlords took advantage of the desperation, with stories of illegal rent hikes, evictions for renovations, and bidding wars for rental units becoming all too common. The days of affordable housing were long gone. This wasn't just about money, it began to wear on people. Toronto's identity started to shift. The diversity was still there, but it was now paired with a sense of competition for survival. For every new restaurant or business opening, there was another shutting down because they couldn't afford to stay. Young professionals, once the lifeblood of the city, started leaving for places like Calgary or Halifax, where the costs weren't as crushing. Families fled to suburban cities like Barrie or Hamilton, trading long commutes for a chance to own property. By 2025, Toronto wasn't just expensive, it was unaffordable. And the rising wealth gap made it worse. High-income earners in industries like tech or finance continued to live comfortably, but a growing number of residents struggled to make ends meet. Financial insecurity turned into social instability, with crime rates creeping up. Stories of petty theft, break-ins, and even violent crimes became common. People who once saw Toronto as a safe, welcoming city began to question what had gone wrong. Take, for example, a longtime resident named Maria. She moved to Toronto in 2008, drawn by its promise of opportunity and community. By 2015, she had a stable job, a cozy apartment, and dreams of buying a home. But by 2025, those dreams had evaporated. Her rent had doubled, her neighborhood felt less safe, and she was considering leaving the city she once loved. Maria's story isn't unique, it's the reality for countless Torontonians. Toronto always used to feel attainable, a place where people could build a future. Now, for every shiny glass condo that goes up, there's a story of someone being displaced. For every headline about inclusion and diversity, there's another about the growing homeless population or the staggering waitlists for affordable housing. This is where we've landed in 2025. Toronto's downfall didn't happen overnight. It was a slow burn that started with small cracks in 2015 and spiraled into something bigger. The housing crisis wasn't just a financial blow, it gutted the soul of the city. Toronto isn't just losing its livability ranking, it's losing the very essence that made people fall in love with it in the first place. And here's the real concern: housing is just the tip of the iceberg. As we move into the next section, we'll explore how deep these cracks run, because making it in Toronto in 2025 isn't just about housing anymore. It's about whether the city can still offer the opportunities that once made it a dream destination. 2. The housing crisis. Can you even afford to live here? Let's talk about the housing situation in Toronto in 2025. The dream of owning a home here? For many, it's just that, a dream. Buying a house 10 years ago was tough, but today, it's a whole new level of impossible. The average price of a detached home in the city is $1.65 million. Condos, once seen as a more affordable option, now average $760,000. For first-time buyers, these numbers feel like a wall they can't climb. Back in 2015, the average home price in Toronto was $622,000. Expensive, yes, but at least it felt achievable with some discipline, cutting back on vacations, eating in, saving diligently. People believed they could get there. Now, even dual-income families are struggling to see a way forward. Rising interest rates have only made things worse. Mortgages that once seemed manageable are now out of reach. Imagine saving for years, making a down payment, and still being left with a monthly mortgage payment that eats up nearly everything you earn, and it's not just the prices. The supply of homes in the city is painfully low. There simply aren't enough houses to meet demand. Picture a crowded room with one chair left. Who gets it? Not the person who needs it most, but the one with the deepest pockets. This shortage has turned home buying into a competition, not a milestone. Families are giving up, moving to cities like Oshawa, Barrie, or Hamilton. But even there, prices are climbing fast, making it harder to find relief. For many, homeownership isn't even an option anymore. Renting has become the only path forward. But is it any better? In 2025, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Toronto is $2,400 a month. A two-bedroom? $3,084. A three-bedroom? $3,642. Someone earning $50,000 a year would spend over half their income just to rent a one-bedroom. Back in 2015, one-bedrooms averaged $1,200. It wasn't cheap, but at least middle-class residents could stretch their budgets to make it work. Now, even shared housing feels out of reach. The old 30% rule, spending no more than 30% of your income on rent, is a distant memory. This isn't just a low-income problem. It's hitting people who once considered themselves financially stable. Take someone earning $100,000 a year. A decade ago, that salary could comfortably cover rent, with room for savings, dining out, and maybe even travel. Today, that same income barely covers the basics. When middle and upper middle class earners are feeling the squeeze, it's clear the system is broken. The emotional toll is staggering. Families who dreamed of settling in Toronto are making heartbreaking decisions, pulling kids out of schools, moving farther away, and enduring longer commutes, or staying in the city and sacrificing retirement savings to live paycheck to paycheck. For some, owning a home doesn't just feel impossible, it feels reckless. Why invest in something when every step of the process feels rigged against you? Renting isn't much better. With prices rising so quickly, renters live in constant fear of rent hikes or eviction. Some landlords exploit the crisis, raising rents or evicting tenants under the guise of renovations, only to relist at higher prices. It's cruel, but it happens all the time. The result? People are crammed into smaller spaces, barely scraping by just to keep a roof over their heads. This crisis doesn't just affect individuals, it ripples outward. People are less likely to take career risks or make big life changes because their financial futures feel so uncertain. Small businesses are struggling too, as fewer people have disposable income to spend. It's as if the entire economic engine of Toronto is tied to housing costs, and right now, it's sputtering. Where does that leave us? The financial and emotional strain is reshaping Toronto. The middle class, once the backbone of the city, is being pushed out. The gap between the haves and the have-nots is growing wider, and it's not just making life harder, it's changing the city itself. So, what happens next? Can this be fixed? For many, it feels like the dream of building a life in Toronto is slipping away. 3. Immigration and population growth, a double-edged sword. Toronto's diversity has always been its pride and joy. It's what makes the city unique, celebrated everywhere from food festivals to community events. But as we dig deeper, there's a growing question: has the city reached its breaking point? Over the past decade, Canada set ambitious immigration targets, aiming to welcome 500,000 permanent residents in 2025 alone. The idea was straightforward: more people, more growth. The government sought to address worker shortages in industries like healthcare, trades, and tech while tackling the challenges of an aging population. On paper, it made sense. But Toronto, as one of the most popular destinations for newcomers, has felt the strain more than most. Starting around 2015, the city saw a surge of energy as immigrants arrived, bringing skills, opening businesses, and creating opportunities. This growth was celebrated for its contributions to Toronto's economy and culture. However, the influx also intensified an already strained housing market. Every family moving into the city needed a place to live, and as demand skyrocketed, so did prices. It's a simple equation: too many people chasing too few homes. Take international students and temporary workers, for example. Over the past decade, hundreds of thousands have come to Canada annually, many settling in Toronto. Students are drawn to the city's world-class universities, while workers see it as a stepping stone to permanent residency. But temporary residents face even greater challenges in securing stable housing. Many students rent cramped rooms in poorly maintained homes, often sharing with 3 or 4 others just to afford rent. For them, the issue isn't just affordability, it's availability. Landlords often prioritize long-term tenants who can pay more, leaving temporary residents at a disadvantage. This brings us to a larger debate: immigration as a driver of economic growth versus its role in the housing crisis. Politicians emphasize the benefits: immigrants fill jobs, pay taxes, and contribute to the economy. But critics argue that the influx of people, without a corresponding increase in housing or infrastructure, has left Toronto overwhelmed. The cracks in the system are hard to ignore. Public services like healthcare and transit were already under pressure before this wave of newcomers. Now, they're stretched to the limit. Wait times for family doctors, overcrowded buses, and packed classrooms are all symptoms of a city struggling to keep up. Public opinion has shifted dramatically. In 2022, a survey found that 27% of Canadians believed immigration levels were too high. By 2024, that number had jumped to 58%. This reflects growing frustration from residents who feel their struggles are being overlooked. One Toronto resident put it bluntly in a recent interview: "It's not that we don't want newcomers, it's that the city just isn't ready for them." Protests have emerged, with some groups calling for lower immigration levels or questioning whether the government can adequately support newcomers. It's a divisive issue, one that highlights the tension between immigration's undeniable benefits and the challenges it brings. To address these concerns, the government announced plans to slow population growth slightly while increasing investments in affordable housing. The plan sounds promising, but implementation takes years, and many Toronto residents feel they can't wait that long. Affordable housing projects often face delays or funding issues, leaving people skeptical about whether this is a real solution or just a band-aid. Meanwhile, the housing crisis continues to push people toward desperation. For many immigrants, Toronto isn't the city they imagined. Newcomers who came here for opportunities are finding it hard to live comfortably, competing with long-time residents who are also feeling the squeeze. The housing crisis and population boom have exposed a deeper issue. Toronto wasn't prepared for this level of growth. Urban planning lagged behind reality. It's not just about housing, it's about transit, schools, parks, and even grocery stores that can't keep up with demand. For years, policymakers focused on attracting skilled workers without ensuring the city could support them. Instead of planning for the future, Toronto reacted to the present, and now it's paying the price. This tension plays out in protests, policy debates, and everyday conversations. Some argue for lowering immigration levels until the city catches up. Others believe immigration should continue as planned but paired with major investments in housing and infrastructure. The problem is, those investments should have started years ago. Now, Toronto is trying to fix the mess while maintaining its status as Canada's crown jewel. The irony? Most immigrants aren't asking for handouts, they're asking for the basics: affordable housing, fair wages, and decent living conditions. These aren't luxuries, they're necessities. Immigration undeniably boosts Toronto's economy and enriches its culture, but the current system isn't sustainable. And it's not just newcomers who are struggling. Long-time residents are frustrated, too, watching their rents rise while infrastructure fails to grow alongside the population. It's a cycle that's hard to break. At its core, immigration remains one of Toronto's greatest strengths, but it has also revealed major flaws. The challenges we're seeing now aren't because of immigration itself, they're because the city wasn't ready for this growth. Toronto has the potential to figure this out, but the clock is ticking, and as of 2025, the cracks are becoming impossible to ignore. Whether the city can rise to the challenge remains to be seen. 4. The ripple effect: crime, unemployment, and young professionals. Toronto used to symbolize opportunity, a city where people could build careers, start families, and chase their dreams. But in 2025, that image is shifting. The challenges we've discussed, housing, cost of living, and population growth, are no longer isolated issues. They're rippling outward, reshaping daily life for many residents. Rising crime, unemployment, and stagnant wages are creating a harsher reality, especially for young professionals and long-time residents. The question now is, can Toronto still be the city of opportunity, or has it become too difficult for most to thrive? Take crime, for example. In 2015, Toronto was often celebrated as one of the safest major cities in North America. Residents felt comfortable walking through most neighborhoods, even at night. But over the past decade, crime rates have crept upward, becoming more noticeable as financial pressures mounted. Property crimes like break-ins and theft have increased, and while violent crime remains relatively low compared to other cities, it's been rising steadily. This shift isn't just something people read about, it's something they feel. Neighbors talk about installing extra locks or avoiding certain areas after dark. The Toronto of today feels less secure, less welcoming, and for many, less like home. This growing sense of unease ties directly to economic struggles. Toronto's job market, once a magnet for newcomers, is faltering in key areas. Automation has displaced workers in industries like manufacturing, while other sectors haven't grown fast enough to absorb them. The gig economy, initially seen as a flexible way to earn, has left many with unstable incomes and no safety net. While thriving industries like tech and finance still offer opportunities, they're out of reach for those without specialized skills or degrees. The result is a widening gap between those who are succeeding and those who are barely scraping by. For young professionals, the challenges are especially stark. Picture someone in their late 20s, juggling student loan payments and rent while trying to save for the future. They're entering a job market where wages haven't kept pace with the cost of living, and housing prices are climbing faster than they can adjust. Back in 2015, buying a home or renting a one-bedroom apartment was tough but achievable with careful budgeting. Now, that same person might be renting a small room in shared housing, not by choice, but out of necessity. Their day-to-day life might involve long commutes, skipping social outings to save money, and constantly worrying about unexpected expenses. It's a grind that leaves little room for optimism. These financial pressures don't just affect individuals, they're reshaping the city itself. Some residents, feeling squeezed out, are leaving entirely. Stories of people moving to smaller cities like Halifax or Calgary are becoming more common. These places offer lower rents, better work-life balance, and the chance to build a future without constant financial stress. But leaving Toronto isn't easy. It often means giving up friendships, professional networks, and the familiarity of the city. For many, it's a reluctant choice, made only after realizing that staying no longer feels sustainable. The exodus is also changing how Toronto is perceived. Once seen as a beacon of opportunity, the city is now making headlines for its high cost of living, unaffordable housing, and overburdened public services. International students and skilled workers who once dreamed of moving here are reconsidering, opting for other cities or staying in their home countries. Even those who do come often arrive with tempered expectations, and some leave disillusioned. Meanwhile, Toronto's thriving industries highlight the growing divide. The tech and finance sectors are booming, offering incredible opportunities for those who can break in. But for others, retail workers, artists, or anyone outside these high-paying fields, the city feels increasingly out of reach. If you're earning a six-figure salary, you might grumble about housing prices but still manage. If you're earning minimum wage, the barriers to stability feel insurmountable. Toronto wasn't built just for the wealthy, but in 2025, it's starting to feel that way. All of this raises a difficult question: can Toronto still call itself the land of opportunity? For some, the city remains a place to advance careers and build fulfilling lives. But for many others, the cost of entry has become too high and the struggles too overwhelming. Toronto's identity is shifting, and its reputation as a city where dreams come true is being replaced by a harsher reality, a place where only the privileged few can afford to succeed. So, where does that leave us? Toronto built its identity on inclusion, growth, and opportunity, but the ripple effects of rising costs and widening divides are redefining that identity. It's no longer just about surviving here, it's about what Toronto represents. Is it still a city for everyone, or is it becoming a city only for those who can pay the price? That's the question Toronto faces in 2025. For now, the dream feels increasingly out of reach for many, and the cracks in the city's foundation are only growing. 5. Is Toronto still worth it? After everything we've talked about, here's the big question: is Toronto still worth it in 2025? Can it still call itself the city of dreams, or is it becoming more of a cautionary tale? Let's break it down. The challenges are undeniable. Over the last decade, housing has become the defining issue for anyone living in Toronto. The average price for a one-bedroom rental is $2,364 a month. Buying a home? Those prices feel like monopoly money. And it's not just housing, groceries, transit, dining out, everything comes with a premium price tag. Add in a population boom, strained infrastructure, and rising social tensions, and it's clear that living in Toronto isn't as seamless as it once was. For some, it's becoming outright unsustainable. But why do people still move here? Despite the challenges, Toronto has strengths that are hard to ignore. It remains Canada's financial capital and a major hub for industries like technology, film, fashion, biotech, and green energy. Nearly 40% of Canada's business headquarters are here, offering career-focused individuals huge opportunities. Companies like Canada's Big Five banks, Procter & Gamble, and major universities anchor the workforce, while a growing tech scene provides roles in cutting-edge innovation. For those who can break into these sectors, Toronto offers a bustling, global atmosphere that's hard to replicate elsewhere in Canada. Then there's Toronto's cultural diversity, one of its most magnetic traits. In 2021, around 47% of the population were immigrants, representing over 150 languages. This isn't just a statistic, it's something you see and feel every day. Walk through neighborhoods like Chinatown, Little Italy, or the Danforth, and you'll find a richness of culture that smaller cities can't match. Restaurants, markets, festivals, there's something for everyone. Ethnocultural organizations and community centers also help newcomers feel welcome, even as the high costs make settling here a challenge. Despite the financial strain, this mix of perspectives and experiences keeps drawing people in, but here's the trade-off. Toronto offers world-class career opportunities and an unmatched cultural mix, but is it worth the financial and emotional toll? For some, the answer is no. Many residents are looking westward to places like Calgary, where the average one-bedroom rental is $1,710, a bargain compared to Toronto. Others consider Vancouver, where rents average $2,633, slightly higher than Toronto but with perks like access to nature and milder winters. Cities like Halifax and Edmonton are also gaining popularity, offering a slower pace of life and more reasonable housing markets. These aren't just statistics, they're real options people are weighing as they decide whether Toronto still works for them, and yet, for others, Toronto is still the dream. The nightlife, the neighborhoods, the endless variety of things to do, it's hard to replicate that energy anywhere else in Canada. People move here not just for career opportunities or the global atmosphere, but because Toronto feels alive. It hasn't lost its ability to adapt or reinvent itself. Sure, there are growing pains, and yes, the system feels broken in some ways. But Toronto is also a city filled with people who find ways to make it work even when the odds are stacked against them. That resilience is part of its identity. Still, resilience has its limits. No matter how much a city offers, there comes a point where people start to weigh the costs against the benefits. Toronto is in a constant tug-of-war, balancing opportunity with the pressures of being Canada's largest city. Some former residents have already decided it's not worth it, choosing more affordable, less crowded, and less stressful places to live. But for others, Toronto's global appeal and dynamic personality still make it the place to be. So, is Toronto still worth it? Honestly, it depends on your situation. If you're career-driven, highly skilled, and well-paid, the city can give you everything you're looking for: professional growth, cultural vibrance, and the chance to live in one of the most diverse places in the world. But if you're struggling to make ends meet or hoping to save for a home while raising a family, it's a much tougher sell. The trade-offs are real, and they're only getting bigger. What would you choose if faced with these trade-offs? Knowing what Toronto is like today, would you still move here in 2025? Maybe the answer depends on what you value most. Is it a thriving career, a chance to live in one of the most multicultural cities on the planet, or affordable living and peace of mind? Toronto's challenges are clear, but so are its strengths. It's a city that's always evolving, always adapting. The question is, does it still work for you? Let us know what you think. Toronto isn't what it used to be, and whether that's good or bad depends on your perspective. The city's housing crisis and rising costs have tested residents, yet its cultural diversity and career opportunities remain undeniable. Toronto's future hinges on the choices we make today. Change is possible, but will it be enough? The Toronto of tomorrow is built by us all. Like a phoenix, it could rise stronger or falter in its ashes. Is Toronto still worth it? Share your thoughts. How has the city's transformation shaped your life, and what does resilience mean to you in this evolving landscape?